Okay, hello, it's Garnet again, and we're continuing on with brain shaping. We just did the introduction. Now let's have a look at the brain shaping as a concept or an overview. The help right now I had termed short term, and I think it's fair to say that brain shaping is more long term. I suppose the question would be, well, what about brain exercise? Is that short term or long term? Midterm. Brain exercises do generate good results in relatively short periods of time, but not 1, 2, or 3 days like the help right now. It's more in terms of weeks and months. I had mentioned in past videos, and it's the truth, that in the beginning when I first had the Neurolite, when we first created it, for almost 2 months I used, for myself, in terms of benefit, not my job as designer and all of that, but for myself, I used the brain gym and the nasal light for almost 2 months and experienced very impressive benefits. And the truth is that I still go back to it as part of the brain tonic, brain fortification process. I can feel a kind of an appetite for it, and I'll go back to it. Now here, we're talking about brain shaping. And I think, as an analogy, the idea of deciding to shape your brain, meaning to move and change so that your fundamental traits are modified, not just your transitory states, but your deep-coded traits would change in a positive way. That could be, I think, explored as an analogy if you decided to do body shaping. If you decided that you wanted to make fundamental changes in the way that your body is, the way it behaves, the way it looks, the idea of you want to really reshape your coordination, your agility. You want to shape your flexibility so that you really can move and stretch and position yourself, yoga asanas and so on, and you really want to be different than you are now. Endurance, you feel like you want that kind of capacity of endurance, that ability to maintain and sustain at a higher level, and of course strength, to be stronger and more comfortable and confident. Yeah, those are all elements that I'm describing from the brain gym, and you'll see why I'm doing this in a little while. But the idea here is that this is a process that takes a longer time. That's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just the way it is. So we would all love quick shortcuts, but the idea here is that this will take some period of time. And listen, hopefully that's all you've got. You've got time. How you are now, and let's say you live another year or two, well, I mean minimally, you might as well be using that time towards something that you want, instead of just letting time go by and still feel that you're not getting what you want. So the concept of the brain shaping, I think, if you think of it as body shaping, because listen, you know it, the body is the brain is the body. Even if you were focusing only on physical shaping, body shaping, that still involves your brain. In this case, you're focused more specifically on the brain, the central nervous system. We've said it before, separating the two is a kind of an artificial abstraction. It helps us think about it, but the fact is you can't separate them. I don't know where your page numbers are depending on your paper size. I'm on my page 30, I've just flipped it over here. And the idea here is don't expect quick change, because maybe easy come, easy go. This is something that unfolds. Brain shaping is extremely attractive in the same way that body shaping. I don't mean just shaping is a term from psychology, so I don't mean just the actual shape. It's a psychological term that also sounds physical, which it is, but it's not limited to the physical. It takes time to do brain shaping, and the big perk is that the benefits last for a long time. One, I've used these two terms, I'll use it again now to be clear, and I'd like you to think of it in these terms: state and trait. State is a condition that comes and goes. You find yourself in a certain state, a certain quality of experience and consciousness and emotion. Trait is a tendency, it's a habit, it's the way that you are when you don't try to be something. It's a trait that you have. So we're working here, with the principle of states and traits, and this is where traits win out, but the way that you modify traits is by the handle of the states. You can't grab the trait directly. So these two, state and trait, are, I don't know, how to say. I mean, they're like that together. You may or may not have encountered this next concept before. It's a little bit technical, but it's going to help you understand a great deal. If you're following on your page, functional plasticity, the different kinds of plasticity I'm going to describe 4. And you can think of plasticity as change, right? So functional plasticity, you could think of functional change. But it's a change that tends to stay. That's why it's not functional elasticity, like an elastic where you pull it, let it go, boom, it goes back to where it was. That's elastic. It comes from a Greek term. Plastic is when you take, a substance, by pure example, and you stretch that substance with force, and then you take the force away, and it tends to stay more in the state that you brought it into. That's plastic, elastic plastic. That's why plastic surgery was called plastic surgery, not because they use plastic, but the idea that you're creating a change and that change will sustain. So they don't call it elastic surgery because it'll just bounce back to the way it was. It's plastic surgery. So here, in neuroplasticity, and in this case using our instrument, the neurolite, it's not limited to the neurolite, right? That the functional plasticity is something that can happen in minutes to hours, sometimes even seconds. So this is where you get change, you get plasticity that is very quick. That's in the help right now category, certainly. That's even during the session itself. So there's functional plasticity. Now, synaptic plasticity, this is beneficial neuroplastic change. Well, it doesn't have to be beneficial, it can be negative. The change that takes place with synaptic is over days to weeks. So the functional exists in place and can be quickly brought into action. The synaptic is not in place, but it can be conjured up so that you're using pre-existing pathways for new synaptic patterns. I have dogs here. If we hear some barking, I apologize. Neuronal plasticity. Now, this takes place over months. This is where you start to get into what's called neurogenesis. That means the actual creation and growth of new nerves. So the functional uses pre-existing synaptic patterns that may be either dormant or obstructed, and you bring them up into action. Boom, they're right there. Wow, that's great. The functional followed by the synaptic. The synaptic is where you've got the nerves and you want them to fire in different patterns. So that's the synapses, the synaptic. And here, the neuronal is actually neurogenesis. That means it takes some months for this kind of neuroplastic change. That's because you're actually growing new nerves. And then the last one here, the systemic plasticity. This is over the course of years. This is where there's the full integration into the organism. The whole brain itself will have differences in shape, literally size bigger, size smaller, and these congregations of nerves will have grown, changed in density and shape, and this is so much of the end point of where brain shaping is going. So this is, I'm going to read this from the sheet, and you can look at it for yourself, either as I read or separately. But when you work in brain exercise, basically you're working within the synaptic and the neuronal. What does that mean? It means that the brain exercise will show its result, its benefit, over the course of days, weeks, and months. Okay? Brain exercise, days, more like weeks and months, because it involves the synaptic and the neuronal plasticity. The help right now, which was our last section, this works with functional and synaptic. What does that mean? It means it takes place within minutes and hours and days and weeks. So it can be very rapid and saturate itself into the integration in a pretty short period of time. So help right now is that quality of the functional and the synaptic, meaning minutes to hours, days and weeks. It's that very short-term package. Now here, because we've been talking about it, the brain shaping, days, weeks, months, years. So what we have is synaptic, neuronal, and systemic. So, why? You think, well, it's too complicated. No, I'm not trying to promote complicated concepts. What I'm trying to do is give you a feeling as to the expectation. You may recall in some of the past videos I said when you set up a neurolight session, the setup, the pre-light and sound, they're extremely important. And one of the most important things, as we talk about we talk about setting, but it's the expectation. It's what a person thinks is going to happen as a result of doing this neurolight session, this light and sound stuff. So if their expectations don't follow the realities of physiology, there's always hope that they have a placebo effect and, they're happy just because it was exciting or unusual. But the truth is that we have to play by the rules. You can't lie to neuroplasticity. And when you begin to work with brain shaping, it's like, hiring an exercise trainer or going to a yoga teacher, or I'm using physical examples, where the idea is that you want significant, long-lasting change in fundamental traits in your cognition, in your behavior, in your manner of consciousness, how you relate to your experience. You want to change that. You want to actually shape it into something else. In a way, become a new and better person. So with that in mind, step by step, this will unfold. So that's kind of an overview of brain shaping. It deserves some respect, but as you'll see in the next video, the progresses and steps and stages, it's not as intimidating as it might seem once you understand how to go about it, and you will be better able to go about it if you do spend time working in the brain exercise and the help right now aspects. It depends on your education, your motivation, the amount of time and effort you put into it, kind of an inborn talent. How you move through these is unpredictable. But I can say, even though unpredictable, you will still feel best when you realize that you're working with the brain, you're working with the mind in terms of the brain and the mind. Is that okay? Thanks.